It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, foreseeable and avoidable, we get the judgment from phase 1 of the inquiry into the Southport killings. Numerous agencies and the killer's parents are criticised for failing to prevent the murders of Elsie Stankham, B.B. King and Alice Da Silva Aguiar at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class.
Are you hopeful that this inquiry will do that, will make a difference?
Hope so. Sure hope so. Otherwise, what's it all for? If we're not getting change, then what's the point?
Also ahead, fears of further inflation rises as the US and Iran face off over the Strait of Hormuz. UK households predicted to be hundreds of pounds worse off as a result of the Iran war. We get the take from the people of Nottingham. And long delays at airports blamed on new EU border rules as passengers report waiting hours and missing flights. And a masterclass at the Masters. We look at why Rory McIlroy is dominating the golfing world. There's all that to come and much more on the UK Tonight. For the 26 children who attended the Taylor Swift-themed dance workshop in Southport on the 29th of July 2024, it should have been a fun event filled with joy. But it instead turned to tragedy when 3 of those young girls were killed in a brutal attack. And now a public inquiry has found that it should never have happened and was foreseeable and preventable. B.B. King, 6, Elsie Stankham, 7, and Alice Da Silva Aguiar, 9, were killed at the Heartspace Community Hub in Southport. 8 other children were also injured, along with yoga instructor Leanne Lucas. Their attacker, Axel Rudakabana, is serving a lifelong jail sentence with a minimum of 52 years, though he will likely never be released, explained the judge last year. Rudakabana was 17 at the time. The first report of the inquiry described his acts as grave violence and unparalleled cruelty. But it was avoidable. Sky's chief North of England correspondent Greg Milam reports.
By the time Axel Rudakabana arrived at that dance studio in Southport, very little could have prevented his murderous attack. But for 5 years before this moment, agency after agency and his own parents failed to take the chance to stop him. The cost was the lives of B.B. King, Elsie Stankham and Alice Da Silva Aguiar, and harm to so many others. The inquiry into how it happened found it was foreseeable and avoidable.
I have no doubt that if appropriate procedures had been in place, and if sensible steps had been taken by the agencies and AR's parents, this dreadful event would not have happened. It could have been, and it should have been, prevented. That what happened on that terrible day was not, to use the familiar phrase, a bolt of lightning out of a clear blue sky. Instead, some form of grave violence by AR had been clearly, repeatedly, and unambiguously signposted over many years.
But police, health and social services, even the security services repeatedly passed the buck. Chances to arrest him, chances to find his arsenal of weapons and poisons earlier were missed. And Rudakabana's parents, the inquiry found, bore considerable blame for not sharing what they knew. In the more than 700 pages of Sir Adrian's report, one line stands out. He said, if Axel Rudakabana's parents had done what they morally ought to have done, then Axel Rudakabana would not have been at liberty to conduct his attack. It would not have occurred. For the victims, there are so many who share that blame.
There will always be bad or inadequate parents. And that's why we have these state agencies there. They're designed to step in and to intervene and to take the action that's necessary. Here, they were on the phone, they were having meetings, but there was just no action. It was like they were playing ping pong ball with this person who turned out to be a murderer.
There were 24 girls at that Taylor Swift-themed dance event in July 2024 when Rudakabana entered with a knife and began his attack. He is now serving a minimum 52-year sentence. This young woman was one of those who survived the attack but still bears the mental and physical scars. Are you hopeful that this inquiry will do that, will make a difference?
Hope so. Sure hope so. Otherwise, what's it all for? If we're not getting change, then what's the point?
You want your voice to be heard in all of these areas. Why is it so important to you?
Because, no, I don't think anyone else should go through what any of the people involved have, or what they go through on a daily basis. No one else should feel like that, because I can still recall like it's yesterday. It's almost been 2 years, and it's still there.
The Prime Minister promised to act on the inquiry's recommendations.
I want to put on record in this House my total determination to make the changes across the entire state that are so clearly necessary to honour the victims, the injured and the families of Southport. Today's report, Mr. Speaker, is harrowing. It is difficult to read, and I cannot begin to imagine the pain upon pain that will cause the families that it affects. And our thoughts are with them today.
But for the lives taken and those changed forever, if only others had done what they should have, the inquiry chair said, history simply would have taken a different course.
Well, our chief North of England correspondent, Greg Milam, joins us now. Evening to you, Greg. It was, as the Prime Minister was saying, a difficult listen, wasn't it? Multiple failures laid out, multiple agencies not passing on information, and ultimately nobody taking responsibility for the risk that Axel Rudakabana presented to society.
Yes, so many opportunities missed, and when you hear them all catalogued as they are in that report, it's striking just how many opportunities there were to have stopped him. And the chair of the inquiry identified these 5 fundamental problems, as he described it, these failings, including the fact that no agency took responsibility. They were all very keen to pass responsibility to each other. They would downgrade their own responsibility. They'd attempt to close the case as quickly as they could. It was an inappropriate merry-go-round, is how it was described in that report. And he said that was the single biggest conclusion he came to in his investigation. Among the other problems, the fact that information wasn't shared properly. For example, Rudakabana was found on a bus with a weapon, threatening to harm someone at school. That was in March of 2022. Had that information been shared, he would well have been arrested. If what was known about him was shared, he could well have been arrested then. His home would have been searched. They would have found the weapons, the ricin seeds, the terrorist material then. Just one of those many missed opportunities that were outlined in that report today, and which we all now reflect on.
Indeed, and also Rudakabana's parents came in for criticism as well, with the chair saying that had they have shared their concerns, had they have shared information with the authorities, this could well not have happened.
Yeah, he says he recognises it was a very difficult environment in that family home. Rudakabana was violent towards his parents. They naturally cared for him, but he said they continued to excuse and defend his actions, even when he'd harmed another pupil at school. He said that was irresponsible and harmful. Their lack of sharing the information, even up until the very day of the attack, was significant. That lack of sharing, it could have been significant. The fact they failed to do that, they failed to escalate, to show that the risk was escalating leading up, particularly the days just before that attack, was significant. We do know that Merseyside Police, who investigated Rudakabana's parents shortly after the attack, they closed that investigation back in November after his parents gave evidence to this inquiry. They said they would look again at what they'd said. The parents did apologise to the families. It wasn't an apology that was accepted. The families of the victims believe they have to share the accountability of many of those other bodies as well.
Indeed, as you rightly point out, it is the victims and, of course, the survivors that should be front of mind with all of this. The Prime Minister did pay tribute to them there in your report. You've been speaking with them, haven't you? What have they made of what they heard today?
Well, I think we've heard from a number of the families today who've called for this to be a genuine turning point in how this country deals with situations like this. They say their priority has always been preventing this from happening again. They want individual and systemic accountability, and they say their fight for that doesn't end with the publication of this report. As you say, I've been speaking, and we heard a little bit from her there, to one of the young victims who was in that dance studio that day, who was very badly injured physically and continues to bear the psychological scars as well, and knows she will for the rest of her life. And I asked her what she wanted to come as a result of this investigation.
How are you affected, do you think, still by what happened on that day?
I just take each day as it comes. Like, there's always going to be ups and downs. It's just the same, really. I mean, a lot of people seem to think that it's just one thing that happened and you can just get over it, but it's really not as simple as that. I mean, it torments you on a daily basis. Even if it's at the back of your mind, it does. People need to realise that you live with it for the rest of your life.
You spoke at the inquiry. How important was that for you?
I found it really helpful. It sort of acts like a bit of closure. Everyone has opinions, and that everyone has their own story to share, and everyone's story should be heard.
What is your kind of emotion about those opportunities that were missed?
It's very hard hearing how everything that happened could have been avoided numerous times. There's multiple occasions where it could have been avoided or even helped him. So, you know, hearing how everything could have turned out a lot differently, it's hard.
So one of those victims of that attack in Southport speaking. Broadly, the families have welcomed what the inquiry chair said today. He made 67 recommendations in his report, very specific ones, for example, about a knife dealer who he says should be investigated by the Metropolitan Police over age verification for knife sales, to more general ones about whether there should be one body that looks at the issue of children and young people with this fixation on extreme violence. The families have welcomed those recommendations, but they say, crucially, they have to be acted upon now.
Greg, for now, thank you. Well, earlier I spoke to the Chief Executive of the Youth Justice Board, Stephanie Roberts-Bibby, who gave evidence to the Southport inquiry. I started by asking for her reaction to the report's findings.
I obviously have been around the evidence and saw other witnesses give their evidence, and very, very sadly from that, I'm not surprised by the number of failed opportunities that the Chair articulated today in his briefing.
I think it's fair to say that the Chair has not shied away from assigning blame here. Part of the failure lay with Axel Rudakabana's parents. How did that sit with you as somebody who spends time with young people, with their families, getting some idea of what goes on inside a home? How does that sit with you?
Clearly, I think, you know, parents have a responsibility, let's be very, very clear, and there is more that that family could have done to identify the potential risks and harm that could be caused. But I don't think any of us know what we would do unless we were in that set of circumstances. And there is clearly others could have been and should have been doing more to understand the conditions in which that family were living and how that was then playing out in their interactions both within the family home and outside.
So that is a key learning, really, from
Absolutely.
What has been looked into as part of this inquiry.
I think there are key learnings across all elements of the system, and you know, the youth justice system is at the end of that system, actually. You know, and our position and the evidence is very clear. We need to be intervening earlier when children have unmet needs and risks, and we are clear that when children's needs are unmet, they can cause significant harm, and we've seen that in this instance. I mean, we need to not get away from the fact that you know that this was an absolute tragic set of circumstances, but we must, and you know, for the families of those three girls, we must learn, and we must learn at pace. Yes. Around the systems, processes, training, and indeed culture cultures in which our public services are offered.
Well, let's move on to that, because another key failing here was serial buck passing between the agencies, loss of vital information about risk of harm. How easy is that, do you think, to remedy?
I think you will have seen, obviously, the Chair's 67 recommendations, and certainly we are very supportive of supporting the inquiry in Part 2 to explore Part 1 about how a single agency could be responsible for holding cases in a different way, so that there is real clarity over who is responsible for what and at what given time. And one of the things that was very clear to me, and I think I said this in my evidence, was that there didn't appear to be a plan about what was going to happen next. So if once, and everyone should have a plan. We should always have a plan for if there is a risk. What are we going to collectively do? Who's going to do what by when? If there's then no change in behaviour, then what's the escalation route? And what's going to happen next? And I didn't get a sense of what would have happened. That anyone was gripping that, and that there was going to be an intervention that would then prevent escalation.
Also, I suppose we should think of the wider context here and the fiscal reality, that a lot of these agencies are being slimmed down, they're being rolled into one another. Is that going to complicate what is needed to be achieved here? Well,
I think we need to always be clear that change preoccupies people. And I'm not saying change isn't necessary. So we should always have our eye on what's not working and what's the problem we're trying to solve. And then we can then work through that. Now, there isn't an endless bucket of money for public services. And those of us that work in public services are acutely aware of that. But there is more that can be done without, in this instance, further investment, because some of this is around looking at what was known, how was it shared, who knew about it. And professional curiosity, in my world, costs nothing.
It feels like an appropriate time to talk about as well the role of attributing conduct to a diagnosis on the autism spectrum. From your experience, is that something that happens a lot? Does closer scrutiny need to come into play here with the number of diagnoses out there and what they mean? Because it's a broad spectrum, isn't it?
It is a broad spectrum, but I think we need to be very careful. This was an act of serious violence. That wasn't caused by ASD or autism. That may have complicated and made it much more challenging for the professionals working with this family, but that wasn't the reason. And there is no link that between with autism being an indicator of risk.
No, I think the Chair was quite careful to point that out, but I think what he was getting at was because it was attributed to autism wrongly and almost lazily, it then got sort of moved along or almost excused.
I think that talks to my point about professional curiosity. You can give something a diagnosis or a label, and I'm not minimising it saying that, but that doesn't detract from the behaviour. So if a behaviour is still going to cause harm, the question should be then so what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it that prevents it manifesting in causing harm to others, whether, again, that be in the family home or, this instance, both the family home and then the broader community. So how are those professionals coming together to respond to address the risk that has been collectively identified? Because, going forward, there must be better information sharing so that people can have the information that they need. It was there. It was available.
So going into phase 2, what gives you confidence that this won't happen again, if anything?
We can never say something won't happen again. I think we need to be being very, very, honest about, working with people. However, this has been such a catastrophically tragic case that everyone must learn. Everyone who works in those agencies in public service must understand their responsibility, and it is a dual responsibility, and I want to be really clear about that, around not criminalising children unnecessarily, but managing the risk that children can pose And they can be highly dangerous, again, as we've seen here, as they grow into young adulthood, when their needs are not met and addressed, and when they are not influenced in terms of their identity, and having really key people around them to make sure that they are not adopting pro-criminal identity, but they are thinking about themselves in a different way. We've got no insight into how he was thinking about himself. We have no insight into what was going on in his world. No. And I find that really, really hard to believe when there were so many professionals working with him.
Still to come on the UK tonight, we're going to take a look at how the war in Iran is impacting household finances across the UK. Also ahead, passengers complain of airport delays across Europe. That's as new border checks come into force. And McIlroy makes history at the Masters. Again, we're going to take a look back at his roller coaster victory.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking,
thank you so much,
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Hello again. The Prime Minister has once again underlined his resistance to the Iran war, saying that the UK will not support the US blockade of Iranian naval ports in the Strait of Hormuz. Sir Keir Starmer said that the UK will not get dragged into the conflict, but the war is already having an impact on the finances of households across the country. According to think tank The Resolution Foundation, the war will leave families nearly £500 worse off this year as a result of both higher gas and electricity prices and also prices at the petrol pump. Despite some lower-income households receiving an increase in their benefits, the think tank estimates that the average income growth for the poorest fifth this year is now set to be just 1.2%. That's down from a forecast of 2.8% before the conflict. Well, I'm joined now by the Chief Executive of the Resolution Foundation, Ruth Curtis. So, very good evening to you, Ruth. Thank you for joining us. We were finishing that introduction there by talking about the poorest fifth families. Your calculation of nearly £500 is based on a typical household, isn't it, that were set to see an improvement in living standards this year before the war began. That's now going to be a deterioration. Just talk us through what is a typical family and what assumptions have gone into this.
Yeah, exactly. So we look at a family on average incomes and we look at what was expected for their living standards before the war and afterwards. And obviously those families can be very different, and we're talking about averages here. But overall, while living standards were expected to grow very slightly before the war, not by a huge amount, but by just under 1%, they're now expected to fall by about 0.6%. And of course, one of the hardest things about that is this crisis is so far much smaller in terms of the impact on energy bills than we saw in, say, 2022, but it comes on top of that shock. And so energy bills, although they've fallen most recently in April, were still elevated compared to the prices we saw before 2022. And we know that that was already having a significant impact on household budgets. The government had hoped that this year might be a bit of a turnaround where we started to see earnings growing faster than prices and seeing that target for inflation return to where the Bank of England would like it to be. But this is exactly the wrong kind of shock at the wrong time.
Because even, Ruth, if the war de-escalates from tomorrow, say, this increase is already baked in, isn't it? That it's unavoidable from your analysis.
Certainly some of this increase. So, for example, if we think about energy bills, we know that that window that Ofgem used to determine what will happen to prices for households in July has already been open. And so what we've looked at is, the typical expectation is for energy bills now in July to rise by about £290. But there's a lot of uncertainty around that. So we said, let's imagine that prices tomorrow return to where they were before the war. It's still the case that we would see an increase of £130 in bills, for example, not a huge increase, but a reversal of the fall we just saw that the government was so proud of.
And you're talking a lot about expectations, and that's key, isn't it? It's not just price rises, it's what people think is going to happen to their bills and their expenses, and then they change their behaviours, don't they? And all of that can have knock-on effect on economic growth, for example. We've been out and about in Nottingham and speaking to people about what their thoughts and fears perhaps are about those price rises that might be coming down the track. We'll just have a listen.
What issues are you noticing?
Oh my gosh, what aren't we noticing? I mean, at the moment, the hauliers that we're using, because I work for a freight forwarder, so the hauliers are implementing up to like 12% surcharges on everyday rates. So we're being hit hard with fuel surcharges in particular.
Because the price of crude dollars now, the Brent is over $100 per barrel. But UK is not producing, we are consuming. Yeah, of course I worried because it affects my purse as well, because I spent more only before the war.
If there were going to be any support on offer from the government, what would you like to see? What help do you think could be afforded to people like you?
Maybe some subsidies on things like the fuel for those people who have to travel a lot, maybe for work, commuting, that kind of thing.
The best support they can do is to encourage countries to stop fighting each other.
My husband buys the fuel for the car, and everything else has gone up, as you say, so it's just another additive.
I mean, there's no getting around it, is there, Ruth? And people are worried wherever you talk to them in the country. What is Resolution Foundation recommending that the government does?
Yes, it's really clear from your clip, isn't it, that we now all understand how these global events can have real effects here at home and in our pockets. We do think energy bills in particular is an area the government should focus, because that's the one that also entered this crisis as relatively more expensive and that is unavoidable for lots of families and takes up a higher proportion of lower income families' bills. What we don't think the government can afford to do is to provide the sort of universal and unlimited support kind of uncapped support that we saw in 2022 that did ultimately cause some of the problems we also saw in bond markets in 2022. But we do think the government should be looking at how can it target a discount to bills on families with lower incomes, a bit like someone suggested in your clip.
Yeah, it's tricky though, isn't it? Targeted support. It's tricky administratively to make that work. It can take a long time to put it in place. And if you read some of the right-wing media, they will say, how do you pick the families that we're going to help? Because the poorer families have already had inflation-beating adjustments to their benefits.
So unfortunately, we can't avoid taking those choices, right? The world just got a lot poorer as a result of this war, and the UK got poorer too. And we have to decide how we're going to spread that pain, and people can have different views on where they would like to focus. But I think having seen another huge shock to the UK economy, what we can't do is let those administrative hurdles be again a barrier. We really need to be able to target support well in situations like that. And I think investment in that infrastructure, which the government does have some months to create, would be good for this potential crisis, but also good for the future too.
Ruth Curtis from the Resolution Foundation, thank you for talking to us.
Thanks very much.
Still to come on the UK tonight, why travellers across Europe are facing significant delays at airports, and the new research that shows 2/3 of young Australians still have access to their social media. That is despite a ban coming into place.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off and make a statement.
What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out! What more do you need?
Travellers across Europe say that they are facing significant delays at airports. That's after the new EU's entry-exit system came into force. Hundreds of passengers were reportedly left stranded in Milan over the weekend. That was after getting stuck in queues because of new border control checks. So what exactly has been going on? It all sounds like a mess. I'm joined now by Max Hume, who missed his flight at the weekend because of those lengthy queues in Milan, and also travel journalist Simon Calder, who's going to explain to us what happened. But Max, first to you, just tell us what happened. It sounded like you had an absolute shocker.
Yeah, it was absolutely awful. We were there well in advance. We arrived at the airport at about 8:30. We paid fast track to get through as quick as possible, knowing that this was going to be the kind of situation. We'd had the warning email. We did our bag drops at about 8:30, and the lady at the check-in said, "You need to get down there as soon as you possibly can. It's absolute chaos." We grabbed a coffee and a croissant and then headed to passport control. But we got to passport control about 9 o'clock, and our flight was due to leave at 11. And they wouldn't let us through because our gate hadn't been released, and there was literally nobody in the queue, nobody. And then 20 minutes later, our gate had been released, and then they held us in a queue before the queue. So they held us back while they let the London flights through. And we didn't actually start moving until I've got it here. 10 past 10, 10:15, something like that, our queue started. We were right near the front. And
what was the explanation given, Max? I mean, if there was no queue and they wouldn't give you your gate number, what were you being told?
Just to wait. Just to wait. We weren't given any explanation. It was just wait, we'll tell you when you can come through.
But it wasn't clear what you were waiting for?
No, well, we were waiting to be allowed to kind of join the queue to go through passport control, but they were just letting the London flights through. And even people on the London flights that were late were going in ahead of us. And therefore, virtually the entire plane didn't make the passport control.
Well, this is all very confusing. I'm struggling to understand what's going on. So what we're going to do now is we're going to bring in Simon Calder. Simon, you're encyclopedia of knowledge about all of these things. What is going on? What has been introduced? And why were these delays so bad? This was Milan Linate Airport. Why were they so bad there?
OK, let me tell you what happened on Friday. That was the day that the European Commission had said, right, every country in the Schengen area, which of course is the EU plus Iceland, Norway and Switzerland, you have to be 100% entry-exit system from today. That means everybody who has gone through the border for the first time has the 4 fingers of their right hand fingerprinted and a facial biometric taken. And actually, this rollout has been going on for 6 months before that. And from what I understand, passengers going in to Linate Airport actually got their fingerprints done and their facial biometric, at which point they were registered on the system, or they should have been, whereupon they simply have to give a facial biometric next time and they're through very quickly. This clearly didn't happen because I understand passengers were actually asked to do their fingerprints again, slowing everything down. There was an absolute shambles in terms of the ground handling. That's very clear because there were 4 flights, 2 British Airways to Heathrow, 1 EasyJet to Gatwick, and the Manchester flight that Max and his family were on. And they were all going out more or less the same time, but for some reason they prioritised the London flights. I understand that the plane took off with 34 people on board, so 122 empty seats. And those 34 people, I think, were a combination of people with EU passports, because they always get a fast track, whether they were Italian or Irish passport holders or whatever. And then some people who actually told a fib and said, we're going to London, please let us through. And it is absolutely shocking. And of course, I fear, as Max found out, as soon as that happens, Everybody washes their hands of it. Everyone just says, it's the passenger's responsibility to get to the gate on time. You didn't. Off you go. Sort yourself out.
Well, Max, you'll say you were there, in good time. You were there 3 hours before your flight. It ended up being a costly business for you, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We waited and waited because initially we were told, oh, there'll be a bus, a hotel, and then a flight the following day. And get off the plane, grab your luggage. None of that happened. There was nobody there to help us. We were just left. We were told, wait for the app to refresh and then you'll be able to book another flight. That didn't happen. We were on the phone, email chats and all sorts. But at about 2:30, it's like we need to just book some flights and get home. So £1,500 for flights, €109 for a hotel, and then the costs kept mounting, additional parking, food. We reckon it's in the region of about £1,800. We haven't added up all the receipts, but it's in that region at the moment.
And what has the airline said about recompensing you for that?
Well, nothing. We've had absolutely nothing. We've been on the phone today as well, and EasyJet are just saying, well, you're down as a no-show. So they offered us £17.91 back, and that was a tax thing. But that is it. It's just we're almost like we just get stonewalled. But because when we were in the airport, sorry.
No, I was just going to say we are out of time. I'm
Yes.
very sorry to cut you off because it sounds like a pretty bad tale of woe there that you've got. But really appreciate you highlighting some of these problems for our viewers tonight. It sounds like some of the airports still have some wrinkles to iron out there. But for now, Max Hume, Simon Calder, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, we should say that we've had a response from EasyJet, the airline that Max and his family were travelling with. They say, we are really sorry that some customers are experiencing delays as a result of EES entry-exit system processing, which has meant that they have been unable to make their flights. These delays are unacceptable, and so we continue to urge border authorities to ensure that they make full and effective use of the permitted flexibilities for as long as needed so that our customers' travel plans are not impacted. Should a customer miss their flight due to EES delays, they are offered free flight transfers on a later EasyJet flight. For customers who book on other airlines, they will need to contact their travel insurance to make a claim. Now, new research has found that 2/3 of young Australians still have access to social media. That is despite the country's world-first ban that was introduced 4 months ago. The UK government is currently consulting the public on whether to implement a similar ban of its own. Our science and technology reporter, Mickey Carroll, has more.
For the first time, we've got major data from young Australians about how the country's social media ban is working. So here's what we now know. 61% of 12 to 15-year-olds in Australia still have access to social media accounts, despite being banned since December. That's not necessarily because they're getting around the rules. In fact, it looks like a lot of them just didn't get removed in the first place. According to the research, 53% of child users on TikTok and YouTube and 52% on Instagram were still able to access accounts on the platform. And when teenagers were asked what kind of impact the ban was having, 14% said it made them feel less safe. So does all this mean that the ban is a failure? Some people are going to say yes. There are a lot of organisations, including the charity that commissioned this research, called the Molly Rose Foundation, who don't want a similar ban in the UK because they don't think it'll protect children. This new research will back up their argument. However, we should look at it in context. This is the first major research on young Australians, but last month, adults were polled and they told a very different story. Just under 2/3 of parents said they'd noticed behavioural changes in their children since the ban came in. Those were things like more in-person social interactions, improved parent-child relationships, and children being more present and engaged during interactions. We've also got to remember the ban's only been in place since the 1st of December. Companies like Meta, which are very opposed to bans like this, warned before it came in that it would take them a while to fully implement the rules. Although Meta did manage to remove more than 500,000 accounts in the first month of the ban. So all these new numbers do paint a picture about how the ban in Australia is working, and they'll be studied very carefully by governments who are planning to implement their own, but they're not necessarily a death knell for social media bans.
Interesting one to watch. Still to come on the UK tonight, the Rory repeat. McIlroy becomes only the 4th person ever to win the Masters back-to-back. We're going to be taking a look at his historic achievement. And why Tottenham captain Christian Romero left the pitch in tears during yesterday's defeat at Sunderland.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Middle East correspondent. We've just entered Gaza. The vista out there is complete destruction. I'll always remember going into Gaza City during the war. All around us was destruction and the sounds of battle. I witnessed the scars of the October the 7th attacks, burnt out homes, bullet holes in walls and bloodstains on the floor.
People were murdered, people were kidnapped.
The Israelis insist that many of these prisoners are terrorists, but here the Palestinians consider them a blend of freedom fighters and political prisoners. These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Okay, there's a lot of firing going on.
Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, sir.
Let's go. Watch way. Right, we're going to get in. Right, get in. Get in. Get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. Next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Whoa. Oh my goodness. Whoa. Oh my goodness.
If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera. Turn around and go away. Okay, but
listen,
I told you 3 times.
They saw 2 guys, 2 bad people.
There's an absolutely packed dinghy.
That is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
I'm Tom Cheshire, Sky's data and forensics correspondent. We gather, analyse and visualise data to tell data-driven stories.
Now, Rory McIlroy made history in Augusta last night, becoming only the 4th person ever to win the Masters back-to-back. In another rollercoaster victory, the Northern Irishman held on for a one-shot win over the American world #1 Scottie Scheffler. Well, he joins Jack Nicklaus, Nick Faldo and Tiger Woods as one of the only golfers to win the tournament 2 years in a row. Hundreds watched on at McIlroy's home club in Holywood in Northern Ireland. That's where celebrations erupted after he tapped in the winning putt. The local mayor said the town was bursting with pride.
The overriding emotion was joy. And even before that, you know, I rolled my putt down knowing that I didn't need to hole it. Marked my ball, looked up to the back of the 18th green, saw Erica, Poppy, my mum and dad, and just like, I just wanted to soak it in. I didn't have the opportunity to do that last year. So to be able to do it this year was very cool. But yeah, I think, yeah, it's very joyful, but also, not that I didn't feel like I belonged, but there's this sense of belonging. You know, I've won this tournament twice. I'm up to 6 majors. There's just this sense that, like, this is where I know I should be.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined in the studio now by Teddy Draper from Sky Sports News. Hello to you,
Good evening,
Teddy.
Sam.
Good evening. He was talking there about it being joyful. It wasn't always joyful to watch, was it? I mean,
No.
you kind of ran the gamut of emotions. Yeah. Talk us through it, how it was for you.
Well, it was a roller coaster over the weekend, wasn't it, watching it? And this is in the context of us being, as sports reporters, down the years for probably 15 years watching Rory McIlroy, hoping he could achieve the career Grand Slam. Did it last year. And then this year, at the halfway point, people were saying, a lot of the best pundits, he wasn't playing that well, but it opened up a 6-shot advantage. That evaporated on Saturday as he went one over par in his round. And then even on Sunday, he lost the lead and then regained it down the back nine. It was always up and down, and I think his fairway statistics weren't fantastic over the course of the weekend. But if you go back to his fresh-faced 21-year-old in 2011 when he blew up towards the end of the Masters, we wondered, could he ever get back there? The fact he got back there last year in 2025, and then to hold his composure, and you just have to feel that that was something to do with last year, that there was, he mentions the word joy, that he was somehow able to rally his conviction while other people were losing theirs. The world number one, Scotty Scheffler, was closing hard on him towards the end of that, but he could just see it out and finish on 12 under and could play the 18th knowing he was pretty much guaranteed to be champion again, and only the fourth man in history to achieve that, with the likes of Nick Faldo, Tiger Woods and Jack Nicklaus.
He's up there with the greats, isn't he? Well, we can get a bit more perspective on this now. We're also joined by former European Open champion Andrew Murray. A very good evening to you, Andrew. Thank you for joining us on Sky News tonight. It has taken him... it took him 17 years to get the green jacket once. He's now got it twice, but he kind of does it the hard way, doesn't he?
It was a bit of a white knuckle ride, to say the least, wasn't it? It's the Rory roller coaster, and over the weekend, you know, he looked so relatively under control the first 2 days, and certainly Saturday, he looked, to me, very ragged. He lost his rhythm, he lost his composure a little bit, and I thought yesterday was exemplary. I thought that his composure, his maturity, all those words about tenacity and guts, and he showed it all yesterday, and it was such a terrific performance.
And is that really the measure of a great champion, do you think? Somebody that can pull himself back in that way?
Yeah, I think so. I think when he made a double bogey at the fourth yesterday, and then a bogey at the sixth as well. So all of a sudden he was 2 or 3 shots behind. Of course, his great friend was making a move, Justin Rose, and it just seemed like he was a long way back from his best. And all of a sudden he started hitting fairways. He hit a great shot at the number 7, made birdie. Great shot at number 8 and made birdie again. And pretty well, he drove the ball brilliantly well, I thought, yesterday, for the most part, apart from a bit of a wobble down 18, of course.
6 majors now, Andrew. To put in context, he's already up there with some of the pantheon of the all-time greats. What do you think he can go on and achieve? He says he feels good at 36, nearly 37. He looks good. He's not had a huge injury record, has he? What do you think's possible for Rory McIlroy?
Well, you know, it makes me smile, really, because we were all written Rory off a couple of years ago. He never won a major, and now he's won the last 2 Masters, and all of a sudden he's won the Grand Slam, and Monkey seems to be off his back a little bit. And it really wouldn't surprise me. He seems to be in form. He's fit as a butcher's. So I really do think that it wouldn't surprise me at all, to be honest, guys, if he doesn't win one more major this year, and that would be, what a year that would be if he was boxed off 2 of them. So don't write him off. He seems to have his enthusiasm back for it. His work ethic has never wavered. Terrific, absolutely terrific. And that was the shot that won it, really, for me. The shot into number 12, just exemplary control of emotions as well as of his golf swing. So absolutely, bring it on, bring on the PGA.
Andrew, I feel like because it's a UK programme, we ought to talk a little bit about Justin Rose as well. It's almost so close but no cigar for him again.
Yeah, you know, some of yesterday, I was thinking, you know, if Rory does have a bit of a wobble and somebody wins it from him, maybe Shane or maybe his good mate Justin Rose, that would be quite fitting if he were to put it on the shoulders of Justin Rose, that green jacket at the end. But it wasn't to be for either of them, of course. But you know, he's so great, Justin Rose. He'll keep knocking at the door. I know he's 45, and people have written him off a few times, but he's playing the best golf of his life And don't forget that he made his mark as an amateur at Royal Birkdale in the Open. I was there commentating, and when he pitched in from 80 yards on the last hole, and maybe it's written in the stars that he comes back and wins the Open at Birkdale. How about that? That'd be a good story.
That'd be a great story, wouldn't it? What changed with Rory McIlroy, Andrew? How do you reflect on that long wait for the green jacket? You mentioned the word emotions on that back nine yesterday. Is that it? Is it emotional control? Is it composure? Is it being able to switch off?
I think it's an emotional maturity, perhaps. I don't know. Who knows? But certainly, he seemed to get a grip of himself after the bogey at the sixth. I thought that his demeanour at the seventh and the eighth, and then the ninth, he set up a great opportunity at the ninth. Played the 10th well, played the 11th very well, and then it shot of the week for me at the 12th, and then a birdie at the 13th as well. So I think that emotional, I was going to say security, maturity as well as security, probably comes hand in hand. The fact that he seems pretty chilled and happy that he's moved away from America and back into England. Maybe he's nearer his folks. I don't know, but he seems to be in a different place emotionally to me, and that can only bode well for him and not for his competitors, of course.
Well, Andrew, thank you ever so much for spending your Monday evening talking to us here on Sky News. It's nice to have a positive story, isn't it, Teddy, to talk about for once.
And Manchester United fans hoping for a positive story as well at Old Trafford tonight against Leeds United. But sports news coming up in just a second. It's not going the way of Michael Carrick's side.
Thank you very much. A footballer's life is all about moving. I never had a problem with that because I was the one that was progressing in my football career.
The Crazy Gang's welcoming committee were making sure their new arrival enjoyed a warm welcome.
I'd had a small arthroscopy operation, and at that particular time there was a lot of clubs interested in me.
But in a last-minute twist, Wimbledon learned John Hartson would not be moving as Spurs.
John Hartson was last week tipped to be on his way across South London for £5 million. That seems a dead deal.
I don't want to do any more medicals, to be honest. I can't pass a medical because of this knee.
A downbeat John Hartson was rushed out of Ibrox today, having been given the worst possible news.
We did not believe he was at the correct fitness at that particular time to go straight into Champions League.
Very seldom you see a player in the building walking around at a club and the deal isn't done.
I'm starting to question myself. I'm starting to think, well, where do I go from here?
The best medical he ever failed. I knew about his injuries, but that didn't matter to me because I think John had played 20 consecutive games for Coventry.
Now for a check on the weather.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
Well, it's going to stay rather cool for the next day or so, with some widespread showers, more general rain, but it is going to turn a bit warmer from midweek. Most parts can expect a scattering of locally heavy showers this evening. They'll bring a risk of hail and thunder, but southern Britain is going to be drying up. The southwest of Ireland will see more general rain edging in. Ireland and southwestern Britain will see cloud and increasingly light and patchy rain spreading to most parts on a strengthening wind. That will be tonight. Elsewhere, though, it's going to turn mostly dry with a patchy rural frost developing under clear skies. Cloud and occasional, mostly light rain will spread to many parts by tomorrow morning, but the wind is also going to be picking up. Northern and eastern Britain will stay mainly dry, calm and quite sunny. It's going to be warmer in the east. Ireland, Wales, southwestern England will see rain pepping up later.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Well, that is all from the UK tonight. Coming up next, it's the world.